We are live right here on the Mets PostGame Show following some afternoon baseball action here on this lovely March 4th, 2025, between the New York Mets and the St. Louis Cardinals. We are recapping this game both offensively in the lineup for the New York Mets, also defensively, some positional alignments that we have to talk about and what Carlos Mendoza threw out. We'll talk about some pitching and the updated Mets top 10 prospect list. Listen, it's a beautiful day. Hopefully, everyone's enjoying their day. I know the Mets didn't get the win, but that doesn't matter. It's about the process, not the results. How are you doing, Rob?
Good, man. Interesting game, like you said, position player wise, and of course, what we saw on the mound today. Obviously, we'll get into that, but yeah, it's always fun talking after the game in spring training because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I am itching for these games to get to a point where they actually matter come opening day, and we're discussing meaningful baseball in terms of the win-loss record and the implications there. But as always, please do smash those thumbs up buttons on both of our channels. This is being streamed, and these post games will be streamed to both of our channels all 2025 long. So if you're a new viewer over on X or wherever you're watching this right now, come on over to the YouTube, subscribe to my channel and Rob's channel, because we will not only be streaming post-game shows, we'll be streaming the Amazing Mets pregame show as well, just as we did last season. And I can't wait to get those up off the ground running. And you all know what to do. Make sure to drop your live chat comments and thoughts. We want to have a discussion with you all as best as we can. We want to hear what you all have in terms of takeaways from this afternoon's game and for the New York Mets organization as a whole. Anything that you want to talk about, please do drop those comments in the live chat. All right, let's get into it because, like you said, it was an interesting lineup that Mendoza opted to go with in this afternoon's game against the St. Louis Cardinals. Jeff McNeil is batting leadoff, playing left field. You see Brett Beatty getting the start, the unusual start at second base. And there was some discrepancy in terms of when I made my pregame video talking about the lineup, because the SNY Mets Twitter account had Luis Angel Acuna playing third base, and then this is taken directly from the New York Mets actual official account, and they had Luis Angel Acuna playing shortstop, and then Mendoza went on to confirm that Luis Angel Acuna was playing third base, which is interesting within itself. But Rob, we were discussing on the post game, if you all missed it, following the Mets versus Marlins last night, we were discussing the ramifications and the potential implications of Brandon Nimmo and this residual knee soreness that he is now dealing with. No, they're saying that it's not a big deal. Everything's not a big deal until, it isn't, right? Everything's is a minuscule deal until it isn't. This is interesting because we were talking about what the contingency plan would be in the absence of Brandon Nimmo, or if Brandon Nimmo goes in DHs for a lot of 2025, even though that wasn't the original plan. We were talking about Jesse Winker potentially filling in at left field, but Jeff McNeil gets the nod at left field. I believe the first time in spring, but I have to go back and double check. I don't know if he actually appeared in left field or anywhere in the outfield so far this spring. But what do you make of this lineup first and foremost, especially stemming from the conversation that we had last night surrounding Brandon Nimmo?
Yeah, this is why Jeff McNeil's on the team still, to be quiet. I mean, his value trade-wise obviously wasn't there, but the Mets still value versatility. And if Jeff McNeil is healthy, he can play left field, he can play right field if need be. Again, that's up in the air, but he can play left field. He's I would say, an adequate left fielder. He ain't gonna make tremendous plays and go gap the gap, go into the gap and run down balls, but he'll make the easy plays. He'll do his job, and he could play most out infield positions in second and third as well in worst case scenarios. So that's why Jeff McNeil's on this team. So I'm not shocked about this whole situation, but the Mets have options, and when you have versatility in guys and you have options, that's what David Stearns liked. And when you have a left fielder in Brandon Nimmo, who knows by now, we don't know if the plantar fasciitis is actually, still an issue, but it probably is because that really never goes away. He didn't have surgery, if I'm not mistaken. He just rested it and was in a boot. So that's not technically fixed unless you have surgery. And who knows what the knee, that could be related to the plantar fascia. And I don't think he's going to start the season playing left field, if start the season at all, and that's concerning. And you're going to see a lot of Jeff McNeil and a lot of Jesse Winker in left field if they're not going to go the DH route with them two guys and just try to get Brandon Nimmo's bat in the lineup as the DH. And I think that's where it's going to be until Brandon Nimmo actually can show that he can stay healthy and play left field every single day.
Yeah, I want to salute everybody in the chat right now, taking some time in their early afternoon to discuss this game and about all this, this merry-go-round effect that we're talking about now with some of these injuries, with some of these positional changes. And this is the name of the game, right? In terms of spring training, getting these guys acclimated to quote unquote newer positions. And Brett Baty is one of those guys as well, playing second base. He did so on a lesser scale to end his minor league season last season. We knew, even before spring training games started this year in 2025, that he was getting a lot of those practice reps at second base, even some at first base, shockingly enough. So him playing 7 innings in the field today at second base is also something to consider because, again, if you move McNeil over to left, which I agree with you, that's probably why, the Mets wanted to keep Jeff McNeil around. And we didn't hear of any reports that were strongly linking the New York Mets in terms of trade talks for Jeff McNeil. And we could assume this could have been why, in terms of them valuing that versatility. Versatility, I use in a loose term with Jeff McNeil because, like you said, he's not an all-world defender out there. He looks at surface, level, like an infielder trying to play the outfield. But at times he has some flashes of brilliance and he's able to play it competently enough to get by. And the whole discussion of whether we prefer, Jeff McNeil being out there versus a guy like Jesse Winker is a whole separate topic. But this is definitely an avenue that the Mets can go down and Carlos Mendoza can go down, but you have to backfill that second base spot. And Brett Baty playing at second base today. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that I'm not surprised. I think Brett Baty, because we believe that he's actually going to be the last quote unquote bench guy, and he looked, according to the reports last year, he looked good at second base. He probably looked better at second base than he did at third base, which is interesting because he's a tall, lanky guy, and that usually doesn't work very well for a middle infielder. But he's figuring it out. And the last thing I wanted to say about Jeff McNeil, real quick, if you don't mind, is the fact that I don't think they want to mess with the DH platoon. And I think that's the other reason why Jeff McNeil might get a lot of playing time in left field, because I think they like that, because if Nimmo is going to DH, you're going to have to look at it as, that's, another couple of outfielders that are going to be on the bench as well. I do wonder if they just rather have, Winker and Marte coming off the bench late in the ball game. If Nimmo's DH and then Jeff McNeil's playing left field, maybe they'll, do a defensive switch later in the game, or they'll just, a big at bat. They'd rather have Nimmo's at bat, at the plate, or Starlin Marte or Jesse Winker at the plate, other than Jeff McNeil later in a ball game. And then obviously, you can probably, I guess Marte could play left field in a worst case scenario situation if you need that bat in the lineup, late in the game. I know that's not ideal, but Winker and Marte has a tad bit more power. That obviously more power than Jeff McNeil, and you might need that bat up later in a ball game. So I just don't think they want to mess with that DH platoon right now. But when it comes to Brett Baty, good for him, right? We know this is his probably last chance, and he's making the best of it. Again, he is Barry Bonds in AAA in spring training. It's just what he does, and to see him playing different positions shows that he's trying everything he can to make a team. And that's why I tell Mets fans, don't go crazy with Brett Baty. Until he does it at the big league level, until he does it in games that matter, I'm not going to get excited about it. He might be beneficial playing second and an emergency shortstop and third base, and that could help us. Defense can help you win ball games. Not saying he's going to be a wizard in any of those positions, but if he can play a adequate, if not above average, second base or third base at times, I'm okay with it, as long as he hits when called upon. And until he does that, it's not going to excite me. But good for him for, getting another opportunity with the same organization that he was considered the top prospect at one point.
And we'll be talking prospects here in just a couple of slides after we recap today's action. I agree with you. This is essentially Brett Baty's last go. In terms of trying to make an everyday stamp in this organization, right, as an everyday player. So, he reaches base a couple of times today. I think one was via the walk. He played second base. I didn't really see too much action, with him at second base as much as Luis Angel Acuna did, at third base and getting some reps over there at third base, and the ball hit to him a couple times. But which is unfortunate because I really do think that Brett Baty, he's not this defensive wizard even at third base, but I think that he would be serviceable, anywhere around the diamond, in particular at second base if the Mets were to go down that route. But I wanted to ask your thoughts about this comment right here from Yamid. If Nimmo has to go to the IL, Canario goes to left field. What would you do with that last roster spot? Now, again, this is a little bit premature, saying that Nimmo is going to start the season off on the IL. From what we're hearing, again, I understand that the Mets and Brandon Nimmo and essentially everything that has to do with injuries, from this organization is always downplayed until it isn't. But with the plantar fasciitis, with this now knee soreness, the two haven't been linked together, but we can assume with the way the body works, as we were talking about on the post game last night, that it could have something to do with one another. If Nimmo has to DH, or worse yet, if he has to start the season on the IL, what would you do with that last roster spot? Would you go ahead and move Jeff McNeil to left field, or would you keep him at second base and go with a guy like Canario who doesn't have any, minor league options left, and just see how he does for the time being out there for the New York Mets? And we've seen him now for a handful of games in the Mets uniform ever since being traded from the Chicago Cubs to this Mets organization for cash considerations. What would you do at that point?
Yeah, people were shocked when they make that trade, but if you really go deep down into it, they don't trust Nimmo staying healthy. And, with Canario not having no options, it's clear that they're probably going to make Canario. I don't know if they're going to make him the left fielder, but again, if it's a couple of weeks, same reason what we talked about with the rotation. If it's only a couple of weeks for some of these guys, it's not the end of the world, right? Your offense should be good enough to handle one of these injuries and one of these guys not in the lineup. And Canario, he was the top prospect. He's a guy that, shown some flashes offensively. So, if you're looking for, he's not terrible defensively. He's pretty, I would say, above average, I guess you can say. I don't think he's great, but he's above average. But if you can provide some power and provide some offense, then I think we'll be fine. But I think that trade was exactly what it was meant to be, right? I don't think, McNeil is a situation where if there's a righty on the mound, maybe McNeil will play left field and you'll see Beatty play second base for one day and get a couple of lefties in the lineup. But with Canario, I think the fact that he has no options, and obviously David Stearns knows that before he traded for him for cash considerations, they knew this. And I feel like that trade was triggered by what they knew before we knew about Brandon Nimmo. And I think I've been concerned about Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo has not stayed healthy since 2022. He's had injuries since even in 2022. He played most of the games, but he even had an injury in that season, and that was one of his most productive seasons. And obviously, it was a contract year, and he hasn't stayed healthy since. And that's always concerning for a guy that is probably here for 5 years, 6 years. So it's really concerning. You're talking about a couple of guys that, especially Nimmo, that could be a DH in a year, if not this year. Like, that's very concerning. But I think Canario is going to be on this team.
When David Stearns talks about roster flexibility, that's something that is not going to create roster flexibility in the future if that's the way that it's shaking out as it pertains to Brandon Nimmo. But when that trade went down with the Cubs for Canario, who, like you said, I believe at one point was the Cubs' number 11th ranked prospect, somewhere around there, which is very respectable. And to let him go for only cash considerations it was a little bit of a head scratching move, like we both talked about on one of our post games here a couple of days ago when that deal originally went down. But at the same time, I don't know, when that trade first went down, I was like, maybe that's geared towards more so Marte, because we knew at that point we haven't seen Marte whatsoever. But at that point, how much insurance do you really need for a platoon DH rather than your everyday left fielder? And I guess Canario can fill in for either spot. We would rather at this point him fill in on a platoon basis rather than every day, because at the end of the day, we still don't know what exactly he has to offer. We know his bat is very real, but everything else, and it hasn't really materialized, I should say. So that was interesting, and it's just unfortunate because now we have two rotation injuries, and we'll get to the pitching side of things here in just a second. Don't worry, because we don't really have much offense to talk about yesterday in the post game and today, with the Mets losing 6-1, and the lone run coming very late in the ball game when some of these guys and most of these guys were already out of the ball game. So Francisco Alvarez goes 1 for 3, 2 strikeouts, an opposite field hit. Jesse Winker had a couple of at bats, one produced a base hit, also opposite field. And then he also smoked a baseball that just got caught as well. So he goes 1 for 2. But up and down the list, I mean, it wasn't really the best of at bats. And I'm just looking at Jeff McNeil and the start that he's gone to in spring training. I know that he had, led off against the Boston Red Sox in a spring training game on Sunday, and he smoked a double off the wall. What's your outlook with Jeff McNeil, man? Because I still, at this point, there's no way he's not going to be the everyday starting second baseman. But this is a guy that we always continuously talk about. If the Mets really want to get to that above and beyond level, clearly the guys in the top 5 are going to drive that. But you need Jeff McNeil, or you would hope Jeff McNeil has a resurgent type of season. And I'm just not seeing in his at-bats, and not even the results of it. I'm just talking about the swings that he's producing, etc. Just doesn't really inspire the most confidence out of me. So I guess if you want to talk about any one of these guys before we go on to the pitching side of things, we have to talk about Luis Angel Acuna too at third base. But what do you make of the whole Jeff McNeil situation, and also just how he's looked overall?
Yeah, he changed his swing. Like go back 3 years ago in 2022 when he still was pretty damn good. And I think he was batting like 290, 300. He was still Jeff McNeil that we knew him. His swing completely changed. He has more of an uppercut swing. He swings harder. He doesn't try to go the other way. Everything's trying to pull. He's not that type of hitter. Why the Mets continue to allow him to do this? And if he's that stubborn that he doesn't want to change it and, wants to be more of a quote unquote power guy. And I think it's trying to lead to his next contract, to be quite honest with you, because again, 300 hitters don't get big contracts. And, he's not going to get a big contract if he's hitting 320 with 6 home runs. He's just not. I think he's looking for that, to be quite honest with you, even though he was on the contract for the last couple of years prior to him having bad seasons. I think this is what it is actually. But the way the philosophy is with baseball now, they want you to hit home runs. They don't see a single as a plus. They don't even see a double as a plus. An extra base hit is a plus anymore when you're not a home run guy. So it's like, I don't understand the philosophy at all. I don't think it helps Jeff McNeil. It doesn't help the Mets. He looks like I don't think he's done. I just think the philosophy and the thought process, whoever is doing what he's doing right now, if it's his stubbornness or if it's coaching, either one is wrong. And to continue to try to go down that route when he's had 2 terrible seasons in a row, it just doesn't make sense to me, because you're not. If this team lacked power, maybe I can see you. All right, Jeff. We need a little bit of power on this team. See if you can hit 3 to 4 home runs more. I can see that, but you can have the possibility of 4 guys in your lineup having 30 home run seasons. You don't need extra power. You need guys to get on base for those guys so you can score more runs. So it just doesn't make sense to me. What you need from Jeff McNeil, especially him being at the bottom third of the order, which he'll probably be between 7 and 8 or even 9 for that matter, but I don't think he will be 9th. Let's say 7th or 8th. I truly think that all you got to do is get on base. If you got to get it through a walk, if you got to get it through a base hit, that's your best scenario. That's your best case scenario, because you want to flip the lineup over to the top of the order for your biggest run producers. I just don't get it. And even if you're batting 7th, you're probably going to have, Siri behind you. You probably have Winker, depending on the situation. Those are guys that can hit home runs. That's another reason why you want to get on base. So I don't understand the philosophy at all. And I'm starting to lean more that Jeff McNeil is just being stubborn at this point, because I truly don't believe the coaches are continuing to tell him after 2 bad seasons to still try to hit home runs. and change your approach at the plate. I find that very hard to believe. But then again, look who our batting coaches. They've done this before with Brandon Nimmo. So I don't know. And Brandon Nimmo has been somewhat successful, but I still think he's lacking in certain areas that we don't need Nimmo to do. But Jeff McNeil, I just don't get it.
And it's kind excuse me, it's kind of a reverse effect in terms of how they are approaching the Francisco Alvarez situation as well, whereas he came onto the scene, had a really good season offensively, especially via the home run ball. Yeah, he struck out a lot, etc. But now they're prioritizing more contact with Francisco Alvarez. And I mean, I guess I can appreciate that, but at the end of the day, when you were a top 3 prospect in all of the MLB's pipeline system, to begin with, let alone the New York Mets system, we wanted and we expected him to come up with a vengeance in terms of the home run ball. And again, I don't know, we'll never know in terms of how much this falls on the hitting coaches, because clearly Alvarez was getting his information from a guy like JD Martinez. It's probably a blend of a lot of different aspects. And, Alvarez didn't really have the most successful of seasons last season anyways. I mean, both defensively or offensively, but it's kind of just like, I see the swing. It seems like he's prioritizing being on time more, and he's prioritizing contact, which is great in the grand scheme of things, but I just don't know if he's that kind of hitter. And he's definitely not going to turn into like a 280, 290 hitter, Francisco Alvarez I'm still talking about, right? I don't see that even in his future. So I don't get the philosophy of that. And again, it's kind of like an inverse relationship of Jeff McNeil. I mean, Jeff McNeil's approaching 33 years old, right? I've said this time and time again going into this 2025 season. This is his last-ditch effort to try to prove to the New York Mets that they shouldn't just ship him somewhere or just DFA him outright after this season, right? But also to teams around the league that when his club option is not exercised by whichever team he's on, whether it's the Mets or somebody else after the 2026 season, that he's still going to be of value somewhere around this league in, like you said, the next contract, as a bench player, because he's not going to be starting at that point. I'm very sure of that. So I don't know, man. It doesn't make sense to me. And there's conflicting, patterns here from multiple guys that are just going the opposite directions. And I'm just trying to figure out what the game plan is based on everybody's individual situation. So that's the outlook of Francisco Alvarez and Jeff McNeil. Again, 2 wild cards that had very down campaigns in 2024 that the Mets really do need to have the most well-balanced lineup as they possibly can outside of their elite top 5. They're going to need those guys to step up and perform in a major way. Luis Angel Acuna, I know it's a shortstop here. He did play at third base. And for everybody that told me I was crazy that Luis Angel Acuna can play third base, right? I know it's one spring training game, but the fact that the Mets and Carlos Mendoza even put him out there in the first place, when we really haven't seen him play third base much, if at all, ever since coming into this organization, that tells me a lot, right? This guy can be a super utility guy all around the diamond, right? Especially in the infield, second base, shortstop, and now third base. He has the range, he has the quickness, and he has the arm strength. I don't worry about Luis Angel Acuna at all defensively in any of those positions, right? What do you make of that? Because he looked pretty decent on all the opportunities that he got. I mean, offensively, we're still kind of waiting for him to make, that immediate contribution he did when he came up in, for the Mets in lieu of the Francisco Lindor injury season. But he's gotten off to a little bit of a slow start with the bat. But defensively, man, this guy's not going to be denied. And if he can show and prove, that he can play third base just like I know he can, then you're talking about a situation where if something happens with the DH situation, that platoon, especially with Marte, you have the flexibility of giving Acuna maybe more regular at-bats. You get better, I would think, defensively, because I do think that Acuna defensively at third base, even though it's a new position, I would still probably rather have him there. And this is going to sound crazy, but I would still think that he's a better defender than Mark Vientos. I know that people get into this mode of we're not moving off of Vientos at third base, and I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying If Vientos needs to fill in at DH, that's where you can plug and play Luis Angel Acuna to get semi-regular at-bats at the major league level if that's the problem. So what do you make of that? Because Luis Angel Acuna proving that he can play something other than up the middle, right, at third base is huge for this team in
Yeah.
terms of him trying to also win a spot on this roster, whether it's opening day or whether it's, midseason or whenever it may be.
Yeah, I mean it's good. It's the versatility is what you would want. I still think he's going to end up in AAA to start the year, only because of the fact that I don't think they trust his bat as a utility guy. I think he needs to start to be productive offensively, and as good as he might be defensively at even third base for that matter, he's an athlete, right? You can tell already that he just because of his skill level, his athleticism, he can probably play all shortstop, second, and third and not miss a beat. I think it's the bat, and I think that's the biggest concern with him is that can he get a certain number of at bats that is probably, let's say 15 less at bats a week because he's not playing every day, and can he be productive with the bat? Because yeah, you can sub him in the eighth inning with defensive purposes if you don't want Vientos at third base or McNeil at second base. You can absolutely do that. But I say this again, what they're doing here clearly is they want the better offensive or the possibility of a better offensive player off the bench. And I think that's why Beatty has the nod. I think they like that power coming off the bat. I mean, just look at what they brought in here, right? They brought back Winker. They brought back, they still have Starlin Marte on this team. It's guys that, can that have a little pop in their bat. If they're not DHing or starting, they're coming off the bench as a bat piece. And I think that's what they're doing here. Look at Canario, same thing, right? If he's going to be on the bench for early parts or not starting in left field, he's a guy that has pop in his bat. So, that's why I think Acuna is going to have a problem making this team. Again, it's great that he's doing third base right now, but if they don't trust or if they don't see his bat yet being a guy that can be a super utility guy and losing 15 to 20 at bats a week and playing once a week, getting a couple of bats here and there, I don't think they think he can do that because I think Luis Acuna, and this is not saying anything. I don't watch every minor league game he plays in. I think he kind of floats and loses interest in the game if he's not in it. It's nothing bad. I think he's just young and he wants to play every day, so I get it. I think he's still in that mode where if he's not playing in the game, he might just, be in another dimension or just, being somewhere else. I feel like last year was a different story, right? Because he got the nod when he probably even get the nod, and it was go time for everybody. I feel like during a 162 game stretch and, not playing every day, I think he can lose a little bit of focus. And I think the Mets are concerned that could happen to him, and it might affect him at the plate when he gets starts. And I think they see Beatty as a guy that, last chance, has an opportunity to make this team do something beneficial, and I still think they like the possibility of that power of that bat as a super utility guy. I think Beatty can adjust to that. I think that's what they think. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's the idea here because I think if Luis Acuna makes this team, he's playing second base and he's going to be a starter. Other than that, I just think unless there's an injury, he's not going to be on this team on opening day.
Yeah, and as we talk, SNY TV over on X is throwing out some sort of, interviews with the players. And, Luis Angel Acuna is saying that he's learning something new every single day playing third base, and he feels good about his ability to play at the position. Brett Beatty was asked about the utility role. If the Mets put him in that, would he be comfortable? He's basically saying, why would he say no? He said that would be awesome. Any spot on this team to help the team win is good for him, and he's in. It's going to be something that we're continuously watching. Again, I think that once I started to realize that this last spot on the bench could be between these two players and Brett Beatty and Luis Angel Acuna, I mean, my eyes have been glued to the TV every single time I see either of their names in the lineup. And, we got the pleasure of basically seeing them swap positions and seeing how they fared. And I think they both did a decent job, again, a limited sample size. But if there's any doubts about Luis Angel Acuna's ability to play third base. I never had any because I see his fundamentals and mechanics at third base, and I'm just like, that guy can play anywhere. He's got soft hands, quick feet, a strong arm. That's everything you really need anywhere on the diamond. So yeah, that's really the offense. There really wasn't anything too much to get excited about. Couple opposite field singles. But that's really it, to be honest. So hopefully we see more offense as we continuously do these post games. But let's transition into the pitching side of things as we're about 30 minutes into this post game. This is the pitching line for the Mets today versus the Cardinals. Tyler McGill in prime form. I think his first outing of the spring, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, this is a typical Tyler McGill outing. 2 2/3 innings pitched. He threw about 46, 47 pitches. 26 of those pitches coming in the first inning alone. 1 earned run, 2 strikeouts. He just was inefficient. He just was inefficient. And that's been the story of Tyler McGill's career. Nobody's doubting that he doesn't have the stuff to be a contributor, in the back end of the rotation or maybe a long reliever out of the bullpen. Because everybody also wants to point out his sabermetrics and the advanced data, the stuff plus, etc., the pitch shape, the pitch movement, the vertical break. Yeah, it's great. We know that about Tyler McGill. But what about the command? Can he find the zone? Can he limit long innings when he gets 2 outs and not walking that third batter to put more stress on himself? That's exactly what happened in the first inning today. And that's something that I just don't think that he's going to shake, if he gets the chance to be in this rotation come opening day. So what do you make of McGill's outing? I think it was less than impressive. I think the stuff was there. It's just the command wasn't. He was inefficient. And I think that this is just the story of Tyler McGill's, I guess, last couple seasons, to be honest. So that's the final line of McGill. And you see Stanek and Garrett also coming in and providing scoreless innings, 3 strikeouts between those two guys right there. So what do you make of the pitching today?
Yeah, with Tyler McGill, I mean, this is what we get. Inefficient work, just doesn't do what you need him to do. He'll have a good outing, he'll have a bad outing, he'll have an in-between outing. He's not, you can't, he's not predictable. He is what he is. And this is the other concern that I have. The whole time, regardless of, what the Mets did, a healthy rotation, you're one injury away of seeing a Tyler McGill, a Griffin Cannon. That was my biggest concern from the jump, and why I still wanted a guy that was a top line starter that is one of the better pitchers, so that you can have him and not concern yourself with the Tyler McGills. We are talking about Tyler McGill and Max Kranick and Griffin Cannon, but in terms of today with McGill, where we need him now, and it's important because of the fact that the rotation is subpar even before the injuries. And even going with a 6-man rotation, Tyler McGill looked like he was going to get the nod anyway. And who knows if the Mets are going to go to a 6-man rotation at this point. But with the injuries, you're going to see him. And that's my biggest concern. When you start talking about the Paul Blackburns of the world and the Tyler McGills of the world, and when it's coming up so often, it's because your rotation is not that good. And that is the issue, because you're going to have to count on him. Is it okay just to lose every 5th game of, in a week? No. That's the issue. I'm not saying it's going to always happen, but, when you got Blackburn, McGill, and name the other starter, if you're going to do it to a 6-man rotation, that causes losing streaks. And I know the offense has something to do with it. The bullpen has something to do with it. But, you can't have Tyler McGill pitching 2 2/3, giving up a run, 2 strikeouts. Just think, he do what, 40-something pitches today? If I'm not mistaken, around 38.
46, 47.
That's a lot of pitches in 2 innings.
Yeah.
In 2 2/3. If he got through the 4th inning, he'd probably do 90 pitches in 4 innings. Why I keep saying, look how much you're going to have to use this bullpen in the back end of the rotation from 4 to 6. And that's a huge problem. McGill is just, I said it. That's why I would have rather had Quintana. I would have rather had somebody else. Maybe Max Kranick is a guy that you can throw in there, but I don't think he's replacing Tyler McGill.
I was just going to ask you that. Do you think Kranick gets the nod over McGill if that's the scenario?
Well, if they're going to a 6-man rotation, they're probably over Cannon, not McGill, unfortunately. In a 5th, if it's only 5 starters, yeah, I can see McGill getting thrown into the long man role in the bullpen or just the minors as a depth piece. But
He's got options too, by the way. McGill does.
agree. So that's why I think it's a possibility, but it doesn't shock me. It is what it is at this point. Do you want me to go on, or you want to say something about the bullpen guys?
No, go ahead. I mean, I liked exactly what I saw from Ryan Stanek, and we had a
Yeah.
nice little commentary from Jesse Winker in that dugout interview. He was just making me laugh. Did you see, when Francisco Alvarez challenged that call, he's like, Alvy challenged? Alvy knows this is going to be a strike, and it was. I thought that was pretty interesting. So,
Yeah.
no, but they look good. I don't worry about. We should not worry about the bullpen. You know what I'm saying? Like Reed Garrett, even I think I like what I see from Reed Garrett. I've always liked what I saw from Reed Garrett, especially in a role that he's comfortable with, right? Because when they tried to extend him into a role that he wasn't comfortable with injuries and the Diaz suspension, then he struggled. But with Stanek, Garrett, Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, hopefully he's good to go by the time opening day rolls around. I don't worry about the bullpen and whether, Buto's going to be used in that long relief role or maybe just as a solid sixth inning guy is yet to be seen. But those at least 5 names and 6 names with Daniel Nunez, you don't worry about. So I liked what I saw there. You can say whatever you want about them, but I agree with you 100% that, if you are I'm not gonna chalk up every 5th day if you have Tyler McGill as a loss, but at the very worst, you're gonna have to dip into the bullpen by and large, and that's something that's just unsustainable, to be honest with me.
Yeah, and that's the biggest concern. It's not that you can go through a losing streak with your 4 through 6 guys, because your offense might pick you up one game and your bullpen might pick you up one game. It is the use of the bullpen. I think that's the problem, because now you're gonna have to Kodai Senga to go the extra inning, or have a guy like David Peterson go in extra inning, or even Clay Holmes for that matter. And I don't think they're going to do that early on, which is also going to use the bullpen more. I think the wins and losses can come and go. You can have a loser streak, but if your 4 through 6 don't pitch well, that's even more pressure on your 1, 2, and 3 starters to get it done. And that's where they put themselves in, and that's David Stern's philosophy. And he's going to live and burn with. He's going to live and die with that. But yeah, when it comes to the bullpen, I'm not worried at all. Like, even if Minter's not ready, you're gonna have Genesis Cabrera probably taking his spot. If anybody falters as a right-handed pitcher that is not named Stanek and Garrett, even if it's Nunez or Buto that might be struggling, or God forbid an injury, you got Sean Reed Foley, you got Max Kranick if he's not in the rotation, you saw him yesterday, Tyler Zuber. These are guys that can be replaced. They have options. They're replaceable at least for a week or 2, or even a month for that matter. Right. You stockpile your bullpen and your depth pieces for that situation. David Stearns does a great job, but that's why I'm never concerned with the bullpen with David Stearns. Other aspects concerns me, but yeah, Garrett looked good. Garrett found something last year. I don't know what it was. Maybe, he's one of the guys that actually, really benefited from the pitching lab, throwing the pitches that was the most successful instead of pitches that weren't very successful more often. Stanek is a pro. This is a guy that we wanted back. I like that. Warren, Herget, and Rios, who knows? You might see one of those guys, what is it, Austin Warren? He might be a away depth option if things go awry, but other than that, I like the bullpen as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yaxel Rios actually has a lot of electricity on his stuff in terms of the actual miles per hour. He throws the ball really hard. And honestly, so did Tyler McGill. I mean, he was up to 98 with the fastball. I think he predominantly used his fastball today, the 4-seamer, and then the sinker, and then the third pitch that he used, I believe, was his curveball as well, if I saw the breakdown correctly. So again, like the whole talking point here, because every single time someone assesses Tyler McGill, it's like, wow, well, he has great stuff. And they use all these fan graphs analytics that are awesome, right? That would be awesome if he actually produced the results possible. And it'd be different if Tyler McGill was producing results in seasons past and he came off, to a slow start in spring training here on March 4th. But knowing the version of Tyler McGill that we've gotten over the past couple of seasons, this was just less than inspiring. It doesn't matter what the Stuff Plus says. At this point, I know I like to talk about process versus results. I think this season, if Tyler McGill does get the chance in the major leagues come opening day, first of all, he'll be lucky because he's been lucking out, each season for the past 3 seasons, but 2, he needs immediate results, or David Stern's just going to send it back down with that option. I believe either one or two options available left on his contract. So that was the pitching today. Again, we try to recap as best as possible. There's times in the game when the substitutes come in and we have to do something, and we kind of lose a little bit of interest, to be honest with you, because some of these guys are just like third, fourth depth pieces, like you just said, like an Austin Warren. So the last thing that I want to talk about here in this post game before we wrap things up, going on 40 minutes, is the updated MLB pipeline prospect rankings for the New York Mets. This is the fresh 2025 prospect list, top 10 for the New York Mets following last season. I'm going to be right back, so let everyone know what you think about this list here.
Yeah, look at all those little tradable prospects, right? Again, all these infielders. Look at Jesus Baez, Elian Pena that jumped up the list over last season, right? Luisano Acuna, Jet Williams, Carson Benz. These guys, I know Carson Benz is an outfielder, but again, look at all the infielders that are in single A, double A, that have years to come before they even sniff the major leagues in Jesus Baez and Elian Pena. These are the guys you got to look at that are in your top 10, that if the Mets are needing to make a trade, which I believe they will be in the trade market for a starting pitcher, those are the guys you got to start looking at. Yeah, Acuna is going to might be a possibility. Yes, Jet Williams, Carson Benz for that matter. And yes, I know people are talking about Gilbert is nowhere to be found in the top 10. He was hurt all last year, and a lot of the prospects had really good seasons that were behind him, and he's going to lose spots because he didn't play much last year. But he's still very good, right? Don't forget Drew Gilbert here, right? He was hurt most of the season, and when guys like McLean and Tong and Pena and Baez, look at their minor league numbers, even Benj for that matter. Those guys all had really good minor league seasons, and when you don't play as a prospect, you're going to get knocked down. So don't think that Gilbert got knocked down because he didn't play well. He was hurt. And a lot of these guys that were behind him had really good seasons. So they're obviously going to get a jump up. But Chris, I don't know if you heard me, but I said, look at all those tradable prospects. And that's what I truly believe, right? I'm mostly talking about Baez and Pena, who are legitimate tradable options. Those guys that were out of your top 10 last year until later that year, last year. But these are guys that are tradable guys. They're middle infielders yet again. They have a lot of potential. They're in lower parts of the minor leagues. Those are options that you have to look to trade. If you want to package a Jet Williams and one of those guys or two of those guys to, send to get a starting pitcher, because I think we all believe that starting pitching is probably what we're going to need at the trade deadline. This is what I always look at when it comes to top 10 prospects. I don't look at who's going to help us in 2025. If you need help in your farm system with major pieces, maybe Brandon Sproat, maybe that's a possibility, but I still don't believe that might happen. But what you look at when you're supposed to be a contender for the World Series, and the Mets are that, is what could you use to get what you need at the deadline? That's what I always look at, right? This ain't a rebuilding year where you can say, oh, you know what, we can see Brandon Sproat in July, we can see Jet Williams in August. We're not doing that anymore. All right. You're supposed to be good enough where you're not supposed to be digging into your top 10 list to help you at the big league level. Obviously, Acuna could be a possibility at the big league level because he's already been here, and there could be a spot potentially on the team. But I'm talking about the Jet Williams of the world, the Benjes, the Cliffords, the Tongs, the McLeans, the Baez, Pena, Mauricio, possibly. So that's what I was talking about. That's the way I look at it. When my team is supposed to be good enough to go on a run and be a potential World Series contender, I don't look at these guys as who can really help me and put us over the top, because 9 out of 10 times they're not going to probably do that, in my opinion, right? I know Acuna could help this roster, but there ain't much else that can probably help this roster right away, or at least in a couple of months. I think Sproat could. I don't think the Mets are going to, rush him at all. So I truly think that the way I look at it, Chris, and obviously we'll get your opinion. I just don't think that. I don't look at the top 10 list and say, oh, these are guys that can help this 2025 roster. If we're going deep, or at least using 2 or 3 guys out of this top 10 list to help this team this year, it's probably because of injuries or we're not that good.
Yeah, first of all, they're not trading Elian Pena, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, but they just gave him $5 million, right? I mean, he's not even 18 years old. I'm actually really surprised that he's even a top 10 prospect to begin with. I mean, I should, but shouldn't be surprised. Other guys that we've talked about in the same realm, like a Nolan McLean, like a Jet Williams, like a Ronnie Mauricio, is a different conversation. I'll definitely agree with you 100%. I mean, at some point, you have to understand the gravity of the situation and you have to go for it come the trade deadline. If you're there, and I know that in your eyes, this would have already been done in the offseason to not have to wait until the trade deadline. But, what's done is done, and that's the offseason now going into spring training. But I agree with you. I mean, I've said all along the untouchables in this list right here, probably Brandon Sproat, and I think Jonah Tong. I think he's going to make an immediate contribution. Elian Pena, I mean, again, he's not going to get traded. It's just he's the type of guy that you bring into your organization, so you have that depth if you let go of a guy like Jet Williams in a trade, right?
Correct.
And if you realize that you have an abundance of infielders at the top and that are getting ready to be MLB ready, that's when you bring those types of guys in and give them, a record deal in the IFA class like they just did for Elian Pena. I mean, same thing with Ronnie Mauricio. I mean, I love his bat. I think that he can also be versatile defensively, but at this point, he's getting to the stages where he is an older prospect, and it's unfortunate because he got set back by an injury. So if that's a guy that another team really identifies that they really want in a trade, same thing if it comes down to it with Luis Angel Acuna. If the return is a formidable, top line starter and ace of sorts at the trade deadline, at that point, you have to seriously consider it. But I think it's all fluid. Again, I think that we didn't see it this offseason. We didn't see it for a reason. I think that if it comes down to it, David Stearns will do it. I know that you think that he probably won't do it, but I was very surprised in terms of the actual order of this list. Surprised to see Carson bench third, to be honest with you. I did my top 10 prospect rankings just a couple of weeks ago before this was actually released. I had Ryan Clifford and Carson Bench at 6 and 7, I believe, respectively. I had Jonah Tong at number 5. So some similarities. My top two are the same, Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams, but a couple of reworkings there. And clearly, due to injury, Drew Gilbert and Ronnie Mauricio get knocked down, and that's how they're penalized in terms of the actual rankings. But it is what it is. I like the list. I like to see some Jesus Baez love. I mean, he was in my top 10 as my number 10 as well. So I know how it looks at surface level given the rotation issues that the Mets seemingly have right now. But as I mentioned in the post game yesterday, the way that this rotation has been built, it's a wait and see approach. First half, you're going to wait and see. Second half, you either make the moves or you don't. And that's something that David Stearns clearly was methodical about doing and setting up in this way. And it's either going to work out or it isn't. And that's just the fact of the matter. So I just thought this was a fun little conversation here because I've just been waiting and waiting and waiting when this prospect list is going to come out. Yeah, we've got Baseball Americas, we got Prospectus, etc. But I want to see what the MLB actually ranked these prospects. So anything else, Rob? Final thoughts here before we end today's post game?
Yeah, I just feel like, obviously guys like Sproat and Tong are guys that, people are going to be talking about when things aren't going right with the pitching staff. If it isn't going right in the first half, I don't think you're going to see those guys. I think because Tong made an amazing jump this year and last year and looked really good, and Brandon Sproat, got up to AAA, struggled a little bit, but you see the potential. I don't think they're going to rush these guys, and you're going to hear it when McGill's not pitching well, and Blackburn might not be pitching well, or God forbid, Cannon or Kranick might not be pitching well because we don't know what we're going to get from Kranick, even if he is a starter. When you're going to have those problems with those pitchers, you're going to hear these names. And they're not going – I'm telling you guys right now, they're not going to throw them up into this rotation unless they absolutely have to. It has to be major injuries, and that's when you're going to really have problems. I just don't see them being a part of this roster, at least for the first half. I don't know about the second half. We'll see if somebody makes another big jump. If Brandon Sproat makes a big jump, maybe you can throw him into the rotation, but I think a trade's gonna have to happen, and this is why these top 10 prospect lists are important, because it's not only us just looking at them; it is other teams looking at them as well and how they value Mets prospects. And that's the key right there, is how they value the Mets prospects.
I agree. Because we know how we value the prospects. We know how this fan base values the prospects. How do other, front offices value the prospects is perfectly said. And that's essentially what I'll end this post-game stream with. Mets lose today 6-1. Couple of key positional alignments. Brett Beatty at second base, Luis Angel Acuna at third base, Jeff McNeil in left field. Continuing to monitor the situation with Brandon Nimmo. I discussed it on the pregame video that I released earlier this morning. If you missed it, check it out. The link's in the description down below. And as always, appreciate you all being here. I know it's kind of an awkward time, approaching 4:30, starting up around, 3:30, somewhere around there. So appreciate you all, whether you're watching live or on the replay. Make sure to smash those thumbs up buttons. Subscribe to both of our channels, both Rob and myself. Our respective channels are going to be doing post games all season long, assessing this team. And like I always say, things are fluid for a reason. We are going to see how the first half plays out. We're going to see how the first month plays out with some early adversity, with some of the injury situations for the New York Mets. And then we are going to go from there. So this has been the New York Mets post-game show with both Rob and myself. We appreciate it. March 4th is almost over. The Mets March 4th is over now with this action. So do we have a game tomorrow? I'm not even sure if we have a game tomorrow, to be honest. I didn't really check. But we will see you all.
27th. Let's go.
That's right. All right, we'll see you all later. Let's go Mets as always, and we'll catch you all on the next streamer video. Peace.
Let's go.